Littleton. It is now 7 p.m. on June 14th. Welcome to the Littleton Board of Health meeting. It is 7 o'clock. Our first hearing is a public hearing for 37 Dogwood Road for a housing order extension request. I did not see anybody in the audience for this. I know Jim has been working with the agent for the property. If you could share anything you know, Jim, we'd appreciate it.
Sure. So I'm not really sure. Got a complaint on housing conditions at the unit. Went out and did the inspection. A long list of issues, and sometimes owners need some additional time to get things corrected. I saw the email from the owner's agent earlier. I guess it was yesterday, kind of explaining the things that have been done. So it sounds like a lot of work has been done. I have not been called back for a reinspection at this point. We're at about the 30 days based on the certified mail. So I'm not, there's one issue that is pretty significant, and I'm not quite sure how it will be resolved. The housing code talks about habitable rooms, and it talks about the floor to ceiling height that you need in those habitable rooms. And it says that if you have a room that more than 3/4 of the floor area is less than 7 feet, that the room is not considered habitable. One of the bedrooms starts at about 81 inches and then slopes down to 68 inches. So I'm not sure how they can comply with the housing code for that particular room for it to be habitable. Again, I'm not really sure the specifics the representative had to present to you tonight, but that would be one of the things I think would be a challenge for them to comply with. And they could ask for a variance to that, but where none of the room complies with the floor to ceiling height, I would have a hard time recommending to the board, if they were going to request a variance, doing that. Unfortunately, it's a house that has people living in it, so it's a challenge. And it's an older structure, so probably was built that way, maybe one of the original summer places around the lake. So again, challenge all around. So that's what I can tell you now. Like I say, we're up on the 30 days. I need to get back in there to take a look and see what they have completed. So, Mr. Chair, that's what I have for you.
All right, great. Thanks, Jim. Anybody from the board have any questions for Mr. Greffey regarding 37 Dogwood?
No question. He does the best he can.
Mr. Baker.
I'm just curious. We got the letter from the owner's agent. Are they letting you in to check on things?
So what I would do is generally what happens is the owner lets us know when the repairs are made, and then I would make arrangements with the occupant to get back in and do a reinspection.
Okay.
So I'll contact the representative tomorrow just to see. I mean, her email has lots and lots of things that have been done, but there are lots and lots of things on the list. So I'm not sure those two things match up. And if she tells me it's done, then I can make an appointment to go in and reinspect.
Okay.
Any other questions? Looks like Matt.
In terms of the habitability of that room, is it being used as a bedroom right now, and that's the problem?
Correct. So it's being used as, when I did the inspection, it was being used as a bedroom.
Okay.
And there's adequate floor area for all of the inhabitants in the house. The code kind of breaks it out into living area in the structure itself. Then it breaks out bedrooms, how much space has to be in a bedroom. So there's plenty of room in the house. I think there are 3 occupants. That bedroom, if it had the right floor to ceiling height, would be fine. The other space that I think is being used for a bedroom has the right floor to ceiling height and enough square footage.
So ideally, the occupants could stay there if we just said you're not supposed to use that room as a bedroom.
I think that would be challenging because I think it's a parent and 2 children.
Okay.
Any other questions for Jim from any other members of the board?
Can they use that room if it is for 2 children, small children, just for that particular reason?
The code has a minimum ceiling height, Gino, and it does no part of the room meets that minimum ceiling height.
Okay. Thank you, Jim.
Yep.
So, go ahead, Mr. Baker.
The brand new septic system they just put in, is that a 2-bed or a 3-bed?
Let's see, plans right here. It was designed to be a 4-bedroom house. So I think when it was originally put in, and that may be before the place was occupied, I think somebody was probably looking to maybe tear that structure down and build a new house on it, which is kind of what happens in these situations. But it hasn't happened yet. But the system is big enough for that to happen on that site.
And it was allowed to be a 4-bedroom system repair because somewhere on the assessor's card, the house was listed as a 4-bedroom at some point.
No, it complies with Title V, and I think it required local approval from your board for a wall and over 30 minutes an inch perk rate, which you granted back just about a year ago. So it complies with Title V, but it's a couple of local variances.
And the assessor's card says 3-bed.
I don't know what it says. Yeah, I don't have a copy of the assessor's card.
Let's see if I can dig it up.
I don't
Thank
have
you.
it either.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, I was going to say I was going to try pulling it up, but I appreciate if you could take a quick peek. So Jim, we're at this point, we have a couple things. So we're coming up on the 30-day mark, which is usually the limit unless they've asked for an extension, which I think they asked for at our last meeting. So again, give or take on the calendar, we should be pretty close to that. So you said you're going to be reaching out to follow up on, make sure that the punch list has been accomplished, and we're going to need to deal with the unlikely to be accomplished punch list of that bedroom should not be considered a habitable space under the current code. And I guess this board will have to evaluate what our options are, that simply that can't be used as such, and that order is placed, and then the owner and the occupant comply with that order. The owner can come before the board and request a variance, and we'll see how that turns out. I mean, it sounds like those are the only two pieces that are outstanding, assuming all other pieces of the inspection order, the repair order is complied with in a timely manner.
Sure. Yep.
So it sounds like right now we're looking at probably continue the public hearing until our next one. We will get an update with progress on repairs and if they have any response to the occupancy of that non-conforming bedroom.
Sure. I mean, so if you are going to consider a variance to that, my recommendation would be is that they come to you with a proposal of how they're going to get closer to complying with that floor to ceiling height. That would be my recommendation.
I would say that would seem to be logical, because certainly I'm not sure how else they're going to be able to do that without having a pretty formal building plan of literally changing the ceiling height in that space.
Correct.
Mr. Baker, do you have another question, or did you find that information?
I just wanted to let you know it's on public record on the assessor's card as a 3-bedroom home, and and apparently it's got a 4-bedroom septic. So Jim, there are 3 other bedrooms above and beyond what's the questionable one?
No, so there's kind of a living area, which I think probably seconds as a bedroom. There's a kitchen area, which is big enough that maybe you have a dining room table. Then there's the bedroom that we're talking about that's with the floor to ceiling height's not very high, and then a bathroom off that, and then out to so it's a very small structure. So currently, if you were to walk into it and didn't realize that there were 3 people living in the house, you might say, "Geez, it's a 1-bedroom," just based on kind of the look.
Thank you.
So certainly it sounds like we have some different piece of information. Assessor's office is saying 3, and that certainly could have been based on 1950s original build data, and regulations were slightly different at that point. As a rental property, they would be held to the most current occupancy standard with a new tenant. So if someone has been living there since 1950, they probably would not be held to the new standard of 7 feet. But with a occupancy turnover in a rental property, they would be held to the new standard or to the current standard.
So the housing code applies to all habitable structures. Most people who own their own home don't invite the Board of Health in to inspect. And I've had that conversation with homeowners where they have a complaint in their house and they want me to come in. I says, the housing code does apply to your house too. So if I come in, I would have to cite you if there are violations. In this situation here, it is a rental. And so that's the reason we're in there, because generally homeowners don't contact the Board of Health to visit.
All right. Nope. That's kind of where I wanted to make sure that if the assessor is saying one thing based on my guess is 50s or 70s era assessment, if, kind of where that line is. Certainly we have Board of Health and state housing law, but then we also have assessors and tax pieces and kind of where we would land. So I want to make sure that we are clear, set expectations for the homeowner and the occupants as well in this case that are current. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page and aware before we move to the next step, whatever that happens to be. All right. Does anybody have any other questions for Jim about 37 Dogwood? All right, I'll entertain a motion to continue the public hearing to our next scheduled meeting.
So moved.
Moved by a second.
Second,
Thank you, sir. Roll call vote. Mr. Baker,
Evan Baker votes yes.
Mr. Fratellone,
yes.
Mr. Wason,
Yes, Mr. Royce,
and Mr.
yes.
Mr. Kane votes yes. That's unanimous. We'll continue the public hearing until our next meeting. Sorry, I'm pulling up the date now. And I'm just going to jot down some notes. I apologize. Looks like our administrative coordinator has stepped out of the meeting, so I just want to make sure I have adequate information to share with her for our next meeting.
It's on June 28th.
28th.
Yes.
And for those just joining us, I apologize. My camera is having an issue here, which is why I'm off camera. I apologize to all. All right, it is 7:14. We have a 7:10 public hearing for the Board of Health proposed model regulation for private wells. At our last meeting, we had a robust discussion regarding particularly wells on private property. I know some of our outstanding issues, we're going to work with the agricultural commission and to see if they have any input or thoughts on the agricultural side of the regulations regarding irrigation wells and any other discussion we have for tonight. So the floor is open.
If I may, the first key point that I think we want to make sure everybody understands is that we did not come up with these proposed regulations. 99% of it came directly from Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. Is that correct?
That is correct. So the current model that we are looking at are the model regulation. For those out in the audience who aren't familiar, that many both state and federal agencies will develop basically a model set of guidances, regulations regarding issues that are outside of either state or federal purview, but that certainly affect large numbers of people, such as public wells, a number of other things. In this case, this set of a model regulation came from Mass Department of Environmental Protection. The last time these model regulation, basically here's a template to work from, a starting point based on their expertise, was in 1989. And in February of this year, they have developed a new set of model regulation, which is what we're discussing. So this does not start from zero, as Dr. Wason said. This has come from Mass DEP is basically a starting point for best practices around well regulation in municipalities in Massachusetts.
So the last ones were seriously from 1989.
Correct.
I think the original document was 89. There has been some revisions to it over time. The PFAS task force, I think, met recently, and I think that's where that was the purpose of this new revision in February, was after that PFAS task force meeting. So,
if I could then ask a couple pointed questions then about the content. I apologize for missing the last discussion. There was a section on distance from other key structures or facilities, etc. Section 6, the well locations use requirements. Subsection 2, all of the distances it looks like have some suggested changes in our draft. I was wondering did you guys talk about that already, or what the source of that was?
Jim and I had gone through the entire model well regulations and adjusted certain things like setbacks to fall in line with what Littleton is accustomed to. Specifically, I think Jim mentioned the term spite well, which is, something someone would put in, within, what was that, Jim? Like within that 10 feet or, closer than 50 to someone's property to eliminate development.
So we have situations where we have wells and septic systems on the same lots. That 10 foot from a property line wipes out kind of a lot of somebody else's lot. And so I think your old regs had 50 feet from property lines. And I think that was my recommendation when Kevin and I spoke.
And
That's kind of what I assume, is that we were hoping to inherit some of those from pre-existing, not that we were trying to increase the standards on those.
Right, and that should be all in the markup in the OneDrive that I had redlined after our first discussion on it. So it should all be in there for board members.
Yeah, no, that's what I was looking at. I was seeing that they were changed from old to new. We're just starting with this. There wasn't necessarily an explanation tied to them. That's why. Moving forward to kind of, I know one of the key areas of conversation, which is about the Section 8, the water quality requirements. One thing that I was hoping to do that I haven't done yet was I wanted to see what the approximate cost was to obtain a test of all of the items that Mass EPA says that we should be testing to. Because I think we should absolutely have the conversation with Littleton Water to say, is this something that can be subsidized at all for our homeowners? We have our potential well list is approximately 580 addresses, I believe, if I recall correctly. So 580 households. And adopting the Massachusetts recommended annual testing is not an insignificant cost for some of those households potentially. But I haven't done the testing or paid attention to how much I had to pay for it last time I did, because it was a couple of years ago. Does anybody have a sense for this or thoughts?
We do actually. So prior to our last meeting, we got some feedback from some residents with concerns over cost and frequency. So I actually basically pulled up the nearest state certified water lab, which actually I believe is in Air. I forget the name of it, but we don't need to say. And basically pulled their basic list and added in PFAS, and I think that was it. Basically worked just from that, Section 8, line 3, and it came up to be just over $1,000. It was like 1,060. So a big number. Without PFAS, it's around 500 or 600, I believe. So basically their standard test is around 500. Adding PFAS adds a significant amount. If you add volatile, basically petrochemicals, it adds another couple hundred. So some of our residents, their numbers was around 15 to 1750. Again, that's off the top of my head that they had found. I basically just picked the nearest lab and just ran what their numbers were. So we are looking at a significant investment, and certainly with an annual requirement, if that was what certainly that is what the model regulations recommend. If we were to choose that is going to certainly present a potential financial challenge to a number of our residents. That 500 number for private wells in town, I admit I have not seen that final list. It sounds, on the surface, it seems high, since Littleton has, I think, 3,000 or 3,500 households. in town. So it seems kind of high, but I'm not positive. That's just gut seems high, but I'm not sure if that's necessarily an accurate gut piece on that. We
Yeah,
are not, I
think
believe. ahead.
that's that spreadsheet from Kevin, but it's at least some quantity of years old. So it may have changed, but I'm not sure how much the water system has increased in terms of households
Right.
in recent years.
And so I don't remember that spreadsheet breaking down irrigation versus potable. I think it just had addresses, didn't it?
Right. It's going to be hard to kind of nail that down just from the spreadsheet, but
Right. So
the
yeah,
number's
I'm
a
not
lot less.
sure.
Great. I kind of mentioned
Mhm.
previously, I think we should know as a Board of Health, we should know how many are out there.
Yep. No, absolutely agree. So yeah, that might bring that number down somewhat, but even if half the wells are, residential, lawn irrigation wells, that we're still looking at, 250 or 300 potable water wells, which is still a big number. I don't believe we've reached out to Littleton Water to see if they have any relationships that would decrease the cost, as they're not customers, but I'm not sure if they have any program that would allow residents to maybe access their kind of potential group discount or relationships for lower cost. I will reach out to them, probably start with Matt Lawler as the superintendent and see who he directs us to for water testing and see if that's an option as well. I'm not sure if that's going to necessarily change our expectation, but at least gives us the financial impact a little better idea.
Dan?
Yes.
So just looking at the list, we often do that list that's on number 3 for the town of Harvard. And it includes all of those things, the PFAS 6, which are listed there, the gross alpha and the radon. And it runs about $700
Okay, great.
at the local lab. Now, if you look at number 6 over in that same section, DEB kind of splits out the timeframes and the parameters. They talk about doing this full list every 10 years. And then every year they talk about a smaller subsection of it, which are coliform the bacteria is nitrites, which would be, that may be in the range more of $100, $125. So just something to consider as you're looking at what you want to do with those.
Okay, no, thanks, Jim. That's really helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I'd missed that. That earlier section is a 10-year
Yeah.
recommended cycle.
I don't think we're quite ready to vote on this yet, but I think certainly if we're looking at $125, give or take, for an annual water testing test, and then, well, who knows by what that time, but $700 or $800 for a 10-year. The other concerns from some of our residents, for those who weren't here, was the administrative side of this. If we're looking at 500 wells, annual testing, that simply keeping track of 500 wells, make sure those tests are in, setting up, hey, you haven't tested yet, and then having an agent go out and say, you still haven't tested yet, despite your certified letter. And then what actions, do we take if someone simply chooses not to? Because certainly, any regulation without an enforcement mechanism is merely a recommendation. And I'm just not sure what those pieces are. I mean, if it was a house not connected to water, our actions would be, you need a supplementary source of potable water until it's repaired, or the house is no longer habitable. I don't think it's the desire. I can't imagine it's the desire of the board to say, you haven't tested you well, and therefore we're condemning your property. I don't think that's where we're going. However, but if we're saying it's an annual requirement and they're non-compliant, they can't demonstrate that there's potable water in the house. Is that where we are? I'm not suggesting that any of these things are what we want to do, but I just want to, as we are looking at implementing regulation, we need to look at both what the impacts are financially, but then also what the impacts are of non-compliance, or someone tests and has an issue. Okay, is there ways for us to support them with assisting them with the process of water treatment plant, in-house water treatment, secondary sources, some kind of a bridge mechanism, getting them until there's, public water available to them, all these options. But certainly that was one of the concerns for our residents at our last meeting was, what if, what can the board and the SHOBA manage that significant increase in volume of pure paperwork? And then how are you going to manage it if there's a lack of compliance? So, I think those are pieces we're going to definitely want to think through before we would implement, because they're valid. And I'm not sure what the pleasure of the board would be for managing either of those.
So was it your thought to require everybody to test, or kind of take like the Title V inspection model, which says when your house is up for sale, that's when you're going to do the testing, and then you start to build a database of wells that are tested at that point? I think if the state, there's some legislation at the state level to put it, kind of institute something like these model regulations statewide, because there's 351 communities. Everybody has kind of a different well reg, if they have well regs at all. And one of the thoughts were, what you do is require that testing at time of sale, so that there's a mechanism to have that done.
Yeah, that was one of the recommendations that came out, and it's not a bad one. There's also a suggestion of almost doing a utilizing like a neighborhood test. So my neighborhood of 40 houses, if my next door neighbor sells tomorrow and tests their well, can we count that for some diameter around that, some perimeter around that, as okay? Again, we're looking at, these are some of the suggestions that came out of how do we accomplish the goal of making sure potable water, that private wells have potable water for our residents, while minimizing some of that impact. And that was one of the hard ones. Well, okay, what's our diameter? My next door neighbor and my well probably have pretty similar water, but who knows? But okay, well, 5 houses down, 10 houses down, half a mile. At what point does that no longer, and depending on where the property is, 500 yards one direction may be the same, 500 yards the other direction might be very, very different. So that was one of the ideas, and I think that probably be more difficult to both manage from a administrative side, but also really having it be a representative sample for other properties, simply because, we all know that I can have the same water for a mile in one direction and 200 feet the other direction. It's a very different sample. So we did talk about having it be at time of sale. Our concern was that it sounds like from our real estate friends that the average house in Littleton turns over in about 8 years. We also certainly know that there are plenty of homes in Littleton that don't turn over for 40 or 50 years. So at what point do we go, is it at time of sale or 10 years? And certainly an option, or we'll pick that number, but we're back to that administrative oversight piece of, okay, you've got the list of all 3,500 housing units in town, and then any of the commercial properties who may be working on a well, and now you're trying to keep track of when was the last time it sold, when was the last time it was tested, when are you up next? Not impossible. It's a pretty basic access database. It's just a matter of having someone have that data.
Dan, if I could, as we transition, try to get into using the OpenGov system, just because Kevin and I have been exploring this a lot, I am absolutely not concerned at all about the administrative overhead, because I think it becomes so simple to go into an address and say, this property sold, I'm uploading the latest water certificate report here, and add 10 years and move along. So I think if we didn't have any systems, we'd have to spend some more energy on that. But I see our future is that I don't think we're gonna have to spend a whole lot of minutes sorting through that. And I think it would work out pretty easily. I also had that was my idea to say, well, should we kind of stagger things geographically just to help out? And I think that you're right. What's the radius? But I think if you looked at the 10-year cycle of testing, I think it would be at least close enough to go look at a map and go, well, there are about 12 houses on my street, all on wells. let's make sure they don't all test the same year, maybe just assign a year to them, but it could also be based upon the point of the sale date, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So certainly that implementation piece, again, with anything, implementation is always the challenge. Do we suddenly have a first date everyone due by, pick 1 year out from date of implementation? Do we stagger it by parts of town? Do we stagger it by something else? But then everyone's going to basically stagger based on sale. If we say, okay, my neighborhood's going to be, has to be done within the next 5 years. And then year 7, someone sells, that's been retested. So within one cycle of housing sales, that section of town or that region is going to be out of sync as soon as you have a house sale. So, so yeah, I'm not sure implementation wise, I don't know, my personal I think approach would be, if we're going to do it and implement, then we pick some, 6 months, 1 year timeline that, okay, all currently licensed or, currently, registered wells need to be tested by today plus 1. And at that point, that should be plenty of time, both from a financial perspective as well as a administrative perspective, to make sure those things are done. Some people will get it done on day 2. Some people are going to get it done on day 364. And then we'll have some number of people who choose not to about it, or don't read the email or the letter, or simply aren't, don't have the skill set to recognize that it needs to be done or how to make that happen. And that's where we can assist them. So right now it sounds like we are at a place, our big changes are, I think we're making it consistent with our current setbacks, utilizing the model regs for annual and for 10-year requirements, maintaining the at time of sale, prior to time of sale, so that a new owner has, kind of like Title V, knows what they're getting into. They don't purchase a home and close and then find there's no potable water. And then a 10-year administrative window for the following test. So some of these may never have a 10-year test because they've turned over every 5 to 7 years. They're going to have point of sale tests and never have a 10-year. Were
So
there any other major concerns, thoughts?
if I may continue on
Of course.
my notes here, this is good. These are all things I wanted to discuss. On the selling, it currently says that the test has to be within 1 year. I think that's too soft. I would prefer to see something reasonably closer to the sale of the house, or at least, I don't know if you can database upon when the house was put on the market instead, for a house that potentially sits on the market for a while. But I would rather see that full list closer than a year. That's just my kind of opinion. But then at the same time, on the sale of the house, I'm still of the opinion, you kind of made the analogy of Title V, and I kind of agree with the analogy. And Title V doesn't let you sell the house if the septic system doesn't work.
Well, it does. I mean, Title V is a disclosure law. It's usually the banks that don't let you sell it if you haven't fixed it.
Because the banks don't want to mortgage a property that theoretically you can't live in.
Correct.
But you see the analogy, like, should they mortgage a property that you can't drink the water in?
Right. And I think that's where the state's trying to move with these.
And so I want to push, and I might not be popular in this, but I think the water needs to be treated before it's conveyed to the new owners.
Well,
I
the
think
owner
there should
was
be an expectation by a home buyer that they get potable water in their house.
When you sell the house, they have to do that.
But
It's
they
been done
don't. You
before.
know?
It's been done before. I mean, Jimmy can understand what I'm talking about. Well, it's just like when we sell the house, the first thing they wanted is they know that when your septic system is being cleaned, if it's going to pass Title V, and then it goes the water with it. If you have a well, they probably had you know what I mean, checked it, see if it's okay. Besides, if the water comes dirty, they're going to say something wrong with the well, and they're going to have a check. And sometimes they turn from the well to the public water from the department. And there is not too many people that use the well, they use it for drinking. Most of them are using for the land, that's it.
Dave, do you have numbers on that, Gino?
I can find out if you want to, how many well we're gonna have if you want me to, because Jimmy already knows.
No.
And
No,
there is
no,
not
No.
there is not everybody that has the well, they're gonna use it for drinking. Most of the people that I know personally, they use it for the land, for the flowers, for this thing like that, because they won't cost nothing for them, see?
Well, okay, I appreciate that. And I don't have the numbers. I'd love to get the numbers, but you're talking to somebody who uses a well for drinking water because I don't have any other options. My whole neighborhood here uses well water for drinking because we don't have public water.
Okay, so ask them how many times they check it to have, if it passed the check. Because sometimes the water comes out brown, even though it's in a well. You just have to remember that how deep the well is. 600 feet. They go out below everything. Sometimes it gets dirty, but the question is still, if they check why it gets dirty or why it's brown, they have to examine it and have it checked. Go ahead, Kevin.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Baker. Go ahead. Go ahead.
My thoughts are in line with Mr. Wason in regards to having pre-conveyance certificate of water potability, whatever you like to call it. Just because I do agree that after the conveyance happens, the current owners, if they're aware or unaware of the current condition of their well, are unlikely by some percentage to correct that if there is a problem.
It's been a while since I purchased a home, but for Jim, Title V, again, it's not you don't have to fix it, but you need to make the new owner aware of either it's passed or not prior to closing. Is there some timeline before that? So if I can say, oh, my system passed 5 years ago, it's good. Is it, I simply don't know what that lead time is. Is it months? Is it at, basically I'm putting it up for sale. So what's that window before that say it's passed?
You have to have an inspection done within 2 years of time of sale.
Okay. And I think I kind of agree with Kevin and Matt. The 2 years out seems a little long. But I think that model, I don't necessarily, while I agree that a house shouldn't be occupied without potable water, I think if that is something that, is disclosed at the time of sale, then like anything else, you need a new roof, you need a new burner, you need a new septic system, that is, I think, a disclosure requirement, whether it's water testing 6 months prior to, within 6 months prior to the sale, or, perhaps 6 months prior to going on the market the first time, pick some number, only because we know in this market, houses don't stay on the market very long, but certainly that as time moves on, certainly if you look a few years ago, that houses were often on the market for a very long time. So that 6 months could have come and gone. That seems like a reasonable expectation, even if it's not a correction, at least it's a disclosure. Here's your water quality report, as a disclosure when you go through your house, doing the walkthrough or you're doing your open house. Here's a disclosure list. Okay, we're on well water. We've got Title V. We have our own septic. Here's a Title V piece we've passed within the last 2 years. That same disclosure list that you'd have for a sale, simply adding a line item to that of a water quality if the house is on well water as opposed to town water, does not seem onerous, at least from my perspective. I'm not sure from owners, sellers, or our real estate friends if that would be an onerous requirement to add on. Water quality testing is pretty straightforward. So I'm not sure if that's something we can certainly think about and put out there and see if there's any feedback, if that would create a significant barrier to anyone if we did it that way, but have that same disclosure as you would for septic. Here's the water coming in, and you know the water's going out and it works. That seems to be pretty logical, and it seems certainly a supportable position, a supportable logical position of why that regulation was created. I would love to say you have to make sure you have potable water before you sell, but I think that would be a big ask. But saying, hey, you've got PFAS, that's a concern. Same as having
So-
radon in the house is a disclosure.
My counterpoint to that is that I've seen it already. I wish water treatment didn't become a lever in the sale of a house. So in a hot market, somebody willing to, cut that out and not ask for that to be fixed before they buy. Like you said, whether there's a hole in the roof that has to be fixed or another problem, but then somebody buys a house, doesn't have the capital they thought they did, and now they're having to choose what thing to fix in the house, and the bank's going to make them fix the hole in the roof because they're not going to want to cover a house with a hole without a good roof. And then the family is potentially, or the buyer says, well, I can't do the water. In parallel with that, we're adopting regulations that says we have a board of health must enforce the drinking water requirement. So if somebody gets the water tested, it doesn't meet the standards, hands the keys over to a new family, that leaves us in a position to walk in there on the very first day they live there and say, by the way, what are you doing with the water right now? Show us the bottles that you're buying, or like you were saying earlier, Dan, am I going to say your house is not habitable because, we got your water test and it's not good and you didn't put treatment in yet? But that's why I said counterpoint. I don't think we're going to come to a decision on this, and I appreciate the discussion that we're having, but I think I also don't want to kind of finalize the discussion per se without Kevin Davis's input too.
Yeah, no, I don't think we're the board ready to implement, but this is important discussion of kind of where we are. I'll be honest, I don't disagree with you. I'm trying to find that balance between consistent with other regs. The same way, if your septic system fails, okay, well, you've got a tanker, a vacuum truck coming in every 4 to 8 weeks to manage it until it's repaired. I'm trying to be, I agree, as I'm approaching it, I would want to be consistent with other similarly impactful regulations, but I also don't want to be the person knocking in the door. Welcome to the neighborhood. Welcome to your new home. Congratulations. Oh, by the way, don't unpack right away because you're going to need to move it all back out until you've got potable water, or you've got, a water buffalo parked outside, an Army water buffalo parked outside with 500 gallons of water for the next, couple days for you. So I'm not sure. I agree with Matt. I can see both sides. I don't want to be the person knocking that door saying, here's our regs. Certainly if a water has been tested, just like Jim said, when he walks the door, certainly me as a clinician, as soon as DPH walks through the door of the hospital, checking one thing, that's not the only thing they look at. They are now responsible for anything else they happen to notice as they're walking from point A to point B. If they see 18 other things that are not related to what they're there for, they're obligated to take action or report or document. That same thing. So if water's been tested as part of a sale process and we become aware of it, then we need to take action as well and say, we're aware of this. This needs to be corrected. Same as anything else we would. As Jim said, if you invite me into your house to check one thing, I can't help but not notice other things if there are other things to notice, and I can't ignore them simply because you've asked me about A, I can't ignore B, C, and D. Is that onerous to put it in? Is that there's a requirement to mitigate if prior to a sale? I mean, we'd order if it was it would be an order to mitigate if it was not a point of sale, if it was a 10-year or an annual or anything else. So I don't think that's necessarily wrong or different. And it would be consistent if I'm selling my house or not, I'd be held to the same standard. If I'm living here and staying and my water doesn't pass, or if I'm selling and my water doesn't pass, the issue is the same. This is why we talk through these things. This is why it's not just, hey, this looks great, rubber stamp. To say we do have one person in the audience. I don't see any other hearings coming up. And I see a hand. There we go. To say, Kevin, are you co-host? Yeah, thank you, sir. Chris Kroback, welcome to the Littleton Board of Health meeting. You had your hand up.
Thank you. I was just wanted to ask, where can I read a copy of the model regulations to see what's being considered, and what is the process for adopting them? I'm just kind of curious how
Absolutely.
you guys go about that.
Nope, absolutely. So currently, if you go to the Town of Littleton website, littletonmass.org, it should still, if you go today, on the very front page, it should be a Board of Health meeting link. If you click on that, it will bring you to the information for tonight's meeting and a copy of the packet for tonight's meeting. And that will give you both our agenda for tonight, a few other items, and the 20-ish pages of the DEP model regulations. The packet at the moment does not include the changes, which were the proposed changes. Again, this is not finalized yet, regarding some of the offset changes to be more consistent with our current regs. But overall, the model regs are there. That's probably the easiest place to find them. The process board or here in the Town of Littleton is, first, the proposed regulations are posted. They're initially discussed at a publicly posted public hearing of a publicly posted meeting of whatever the regulatory body is, in this case, the Board of Health. The approach seeks it to the best of our ability, and then ready for posted both in a paper of record as well as in the town clerk's office, and a posting that the regulation has been made available is usually done on the bulletin board outside of town hall. I forget the timeline. I think it's 30 days, but I apologize. I don't know off the top of my head, from basically time of approval, posting, and then implementation. When things are implemented beyond, that's when the regulation can go into effect. Implemented will come out of how the regulation is worded. So that's the gist. Basically, these coming from the Department of Environmental Protection from Massachusetts, they've been posted. We've just been discussing them probably for the last 3 or 4 meetings at least. But they're available on our littletonmass.org website under Board of Health in our packet. And they do not become effective until the board deems it to be so by a vote of the board and a public posting that these are now the current regulations for the community. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
No problem. Did you have any thoughts or input that you wanted to share with us?
No, the one question I wanted to find out in these regulations is sort of how these things are proposed to be paid for, whether it's some kind of testing or remediations. Like, are these totally on the side of the public to account for, or is this like, is the water department involved? Like, I don't know how the organization is between, and where the lines are between the Board of the Health, the water department, and any other things, like how costs for types of remediations, if any of them would be needed, end up getting enforced. Who pays for them?
Well, not speaking on behalf of the board in general, for most things, we'll use Title V as an example. So private septic systems is an example. If a system is in failure, it's on private property, it's privately owned, it is at the behest of the property owner to mitigate that issue. I think at the moment, the board would kind of follow that same perspective, that this is a private property, a private well, providing water for a private residence, that it would kind of follow that same approach as it would for a private septic system, that if your well is in failure, it's not necessarily significantly different than if your septic system or your water heater or your furnace or any other part of your housing infrastructure is in failure or has an issue, that it would fall on the property owner repair that. Whether there are opportunities for remediation grants through the state, the DEP, the water department, those I wouldn't be able to speak to. I certainly know in the past that there are sometimes opportunities for low or no interest loans and some other things for other issues that sometimes come up on private property. I can't speak to anything similar for well and water related issues that aren't connected to town water. We are going to reach out to Littleton Water Department, see if there's any opportunities for discounts or cooperation for water testing, basically on a collaborative basis with residents who are not utilizing their services, but are residents, and they perhaps will be able to help support that. We do not have an answer for that one yet. I apologize, but at this point, really, it's a private well on private property. It is at the, it's at the discretion, or not the discretion. It's at the property owner's responsibility to manage it if it's failed, just like any other household system, I would say. I'm certainly, other members of the board or Jim, if I'm off base here, please speak up and clarify, because this is not speaking on behalf of the board necessarily. It's just speaking from similar issues with other, household things, so that we would look at. Again, without speaking on behalf of the board, does any of the members of the board have any difference of opinion in general about it? I don't want to steer the
I think you're
into the wrong direction.
You're going in the right direction. We'll continue to discuss it, figure out the best way to move forward with it. I do like the viewing it as very similar to a Title V in all regards. It makes it easier.
I think Jim will tell you the same thing I'm telling you right now. If you have a well, your responsibility, if you have to check it, because if there's something's wrong with the water, you have to pay for it to make sure if it's good or bad or whatever the purpose is. Now, if you have a problem with the water that comes from the town, then you bring the sample and they check it and they're trying to make it drinkable. Am I correct, Jimmy?
So generally speaking, we've viewed people who have private wells that it's their responsibility to provide potable water for the property. It's their well, it's their responsibility. The only thing that's a little different here is if you're going to require everyone to do it. It's always been kind of the realm that's their responsibility. Again, it still is. It's just that kind of, I think when they were doing Title V, and I think initially when they were doing Title V and for the inspections, I think some people thought that they would do all the inspections all at once. Everybody would get an inspection. And then I think they realized that they had pushed back. And then that's when they decided to go with the at time of sale model. So again, just to kind of give you an indication of how that came to be.
No, thank you, Jim.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. I hope that helped, Chris. But yes, certainly we are not closing this hearing tonight. So the decision's certainly not made yet. As you heard, I'm sure that we are still exploring all the both positive and potentially challenging impacts of any new regulation. And certainly this one has some great possibilities to help improve the health, but also certainly some challenges with implementation and financial burden on the residents. So we recognize that. So please take some time. Feel free to take a look at the proposed regs and share with us either offline or at our next meeting any thoughts you may have that would be helpful. We'd appreciate it. All right. Any other pieces for the proposed well regulation discussion? We have lots of pieces. I will say I appreciate it. It's a robust discussion, and that's the way it's supposed to work. That's 20 pages of regulation is not supposed to be oh, yep, looks good.
Well,
Yeah,
I'll
but
throw
so-
a last pitch out there that I brought up previously as well about the testing. It talks about when you first build the well, obviously you're testing the source because that's what you should test. But once you have mitigation in place, it doesn't actually say for your annual or 10-year testing where you should obtain the sample. But if you don't read it clearly, you might assume that it still means at the source, basically as close as possible to the well as you can get. But if you have mitigation, what's the point of testing the stuff coming out of the ground if you've got a bunch of mitigation steps in after it. And depending on the mitigation strategy, is there something that you could say like, well, if you're using a reverse osmosis unit, for example, should you pay $1,000 to get your water tested if we know your RO unit's being serviced correctly and such? And I don't know an answer to it, but it starts to become, I don't want to tell people to do 2 tests, but I care about what they're drinking. So I almost feel like the test should be coming at the end of the line. And then if, depending on your mitigation you have, can you flex anything to say, well, that's a reliable system, and so we're not going to worry about it as much or anything? I don't know. Jim, you probably have a lot more expertise in it, as well as the multitude of options and variables that can come into play here.
So again, my experience has been working in the town of Harvard. They do have a policy for testing wells at time of sale, and they have you test the raw water. And if you have treatment on the system for a primary standard, radon, arsenic, lead, then they have you test the treated side as well to make sure the treatment system's working. Much like people don't take care of their septic systems, they don't necessarily take care of their water treatment equipment.
Right.
And so you're getting the raw sample, you can determine whether things have changed over time. And then getting the sample after treatment, you can get a sense that the treatment is still working the way it is. And they also require, if you put treatment on a house, it needs to be done to be in compliance. So kind of answering your question about when do you require this treatment, they also require that you put a notice on the deed saying, hey, your well has an exceedance of arsenic, there's treatment equipment on it, that treatment equipment needs to remain functioning so that the water's safe. That way there, it's a disclosure to anybody else who buys the property down the line. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's kind of the process there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, I hear you, man. I'm not sure if both sides make sense or not, but definitely the post mitigation testing, I think, is an absolute. Whether you have to test pre and post mitigation, I'm not necessarily sure. It's certainly nice to know what the water quality is. What the water quality is prior to going into mitigation and coming out, but I'm not necessarily sure that's as important as what's coming out of mitigation.
Yeah.
If the water quality is improved before it goes in, that's nice. It's good to know. But ultimately, it's what's coming out of that mitigation system. It's most important.
I think we'll just have to make sure that language is clear in there as to where we're trying to get the testing done, so it doesn't become a double thing.
Right.
Cool.
No,
Thank you. I'll stop.
Okay. Generally we have, one opportunity to speak for an issue, but Chris is our only member of the audience who's been here, so I'm going to give him the opportunity to speak again because we appreciate you being here and sharing your insight. So go ahead, Chris.
Sure, thank you. I just wanted to ask if you have considered, to make sure that the regulations are considered in full circle, that if there's a treatment system, this is something I read about, that whatever backwash from that treatment system can be disposed of on the site. And that, of course, if you're pulling water out of the ground that is not potable or something like that, but your treatment system makes it potable, like, can you dispose of that on the ground right there? Or does that have to be hauled away? Like, to make sure that if we have that there is a practical ability to treat and install systems like that, that there's not some other regulation that is not allowing that down the road. There's maybe not a well regulation, but like a disposal, or maybe Title V or something else.
No, thank you for that, Chris. I see Jim looking very thoughtful about this one. So that's a great question. If I get PFAS coming out of my well water, it's going through mitigation. It's no longer PFAS contaminated, but I now have some level of PFAS in the system, and I flushed my system, and I'm now potentially putting contaminated water into my topsoil. Is that an issue, and how does that work? That's a great question, actually.
So that one is addressed on the DEP's website, that one in particular. So Title V doesn't allow the discharge of treatment systems to go back into the septic systems. You don't need all that extra water. If you're pulling iron out of your system, dump all that iron into your septic system. When it comes to PFAS, that very question comes up, and it depends on the type of treatment that you're using on the house. I think RO units, I don't think that they I think they almost concentrate the PFAS coming out, if I read the DEP website correctly. So you'd have to have pretty low PFAS, below the drinking water standard PFAS, to be able to discharge RO water back to the ground. So in that case, they typically want you to use a treatment technology that captures the PFAS as opposed to one that requires backwashing. So that is up on the DEP website very specifically.
Okay. I love it when we get an answer right away. Thanks, Jim.
That's all right.
All right, but that was a great question. Thank you so much, Chris. So yeah, I'm not sure if we would, because that falls under a different regulation, because it's not a well regulation. That is a water treatment regulation. So I'm not sure the best way if we would want to address that, whether that would be, I would certainly would not want someone to identify an issue with their water, develop a mitigation system, and then not recognize that a different regulation is controlling how that system is used, managed, and I would hate for them to make potable water, but then contaminate their vegetable garden because through no fault of their own, simply not recognizing that there's a potential concern with it. So everybody turned. Was there a lightning flash?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's one here.
So yes, I'm not sure how we would potentially incorporate that, whether it's simply through a general reference, perhaps, for under mitigation to be sure the system is in compliance and maintained in compliance with the Title V and DEP regulations for any wastewater management pieces or discharge. That would probably cover that requirement. And I would hope that a knowledgeable treatment installer with a maintenance plan would make sure that a homeowner or property owner was aware of the limitations, but I think that a reference would probably be reasonable to include to those regs. All right. Any other thoughts? I think this is good. I think we're making some good progress on this. Anybody else have any thoughts or questions that we want to follow up for the next one? I think we got some good points here. I will reach out to Water Department and see if they have any either existing programs or would be interested in exploring the opportunity for a new program for water testing for non-participating residents in the water department system. I'll make some notes and share with Brenda so we can get them distributed to everybody. Any other thoughts, questions, concerns, or any issues under the proposed Board of Health regulations for private wells? All right.
I'd like to make a motion to continue the public hearing on the model Board of Health regulations for private wells.
A second.
I have a motion and a second. We'll do a roll call vote. Kevin Baker,
Kevin Baker votes yes.
Gino Fratelloni,
Yes.
Matt Wason,
Matt Wason, yes.
and Dan Kane votes yes. Unanimous. Continue the public hearing for model regulations for private wells to our next meeting. All right, we're at 8:05. We're a little bit late for our 720 ID decision support tool discussion, but Matt, if you have anything to share. You're on mute.
There's the button moved. All right, here is our latest, kind of one of the most interesting perspectives is actually, obviously rates are down. We're not seeing any, zero case count for Littleton most recently. That doesn't mean there aren't any, but just not being reported through testing channels. The curious thing for me is that our variant has been XBB 1.5 for probably 2 months now, is like up to the 90% kind of thing. And now all of a sudden it's forecasted down to about 37%. And there are 4 other variants that are all, between 10 and 37% of these XBBs. So I'm not sure what that really is going to look like, but it's the kind of thing that starts to make me a little worried when all of a sudden there are 5 or 6 variants that are all becoming prevalent in an area. simply because if they don't all act quite the same way, you can potentially get different spreads that come out of it. I think almost all of them are still this XBB. So my hope is scientifically, if you do have one, then you've got some coverage of all of them. Therefore, if you are fully vaccinated, we'll take the assumption that you're still going to be pretty darn protected against any of these variants that are out there. And I don't know of any that is particularly concerning. So it's just curious to see that it hasn't kind of been like that for a long time. Typically, we've had one major variant that then has a small dip, and then another major variant takes its place. I haven't seen this distribution for a long time. Beyond that, our numbers look reasonably okay. We have 78% ICU bed access, which is a much more comfortable number that we've been living with recently. As I mentioned last time, the CDC community levels, they don't report that anymore. So I'll probably basically deprecate this off the sheet. Our vaccination rate, I left it saying 38.8% as of 18 May 2023. It's not because I forgot to update it, because it hasn't changed since 18 May 2023. It's still 38.8%. So that's what we got.
Any questions for Matt?
No, you did a good job.
I know we've just been continuing to do this on the agenda. I wanted to take the opportunity to say, I personally feel we should still kind of maintain this. I like that it's called the infectious agent decision support tool. I'm kind of thinking maybe we just kind of collapse some of the COVID stuff down, but then once the fall comes around, start to report on influenza and RSV and other things.
Right.
So as long as people are still open to that and don't mind taking 5 minutes a meeting to do it, I will be happy to continue maintaining it so that we just have our eyes on it.
I personally am completely in favor of that. As long as you are still willing to do the work on this, that would be appreciated. Anybody else, any other members of the board have any
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
issues with continuing the monitoring? No? All right. Yeah. No,
Always.
as long as,
And you've got the pulse too, Dan. So if there's also something that you feel we should add to this, just let me know. And I'm happy to kind of dig in and see if there's another metric or piece of data that we want to be monitoring and aware of.
no, absolutely. I'll share anything I learn. No, this is great. And I definitely agree with, looking at flu and RSV. Certainly they're different agents and different impacts, but certainly things to simply be aware of and monitor and share with the community going, it's that RSV is pretty significant, particularly for either end of the age spectrum for our infants and little ones, as well as the elderly at this point. Actually, we're finding RSV, where we always thought of RSV as a pediatric illness, that we are seeing more and more significant illness in the elderly population with RSV actually as well, creating some challenges. So certainly something to keep our eyes open for. I certainly did hear today that they are still looking at an updated COVID vaccination for our new XB variants, and FDA is trying to work with the vendors about what the best options are, whether it's continuing for a multi-agent or going to single variant immunization. So we'll keep our eyes on that as well, of kind of where our current agents are and what the recommendations are for vaccination changes. So, all right. Matt, as always, thank you so much for this. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, moving on to administrative matters, excuse me. We do have meeting minutes approval for 5/26/23. It was not in our packet, and I do not believe we've seen those yet.
Right.
I did not see them in my mail, so I'm going to
Whatever next week, whatever.
I was going to say, we're going to hold those to our next meeting if that is acceptable to the body. We do have an annual vote to identify how we process any outstanding invoices that come before the board. So really it is at the discretion of the board of how we'd like to handle it. We can require a vote of the board for every invoice. We can require a vote of the board for every invoice and signatures of all members. Some representative sample of the members, the chair or vice chair, chair and vice chair, or simply grant authority to the chair to sign invoices at their discretion, with the understanding that anything that is concerning, questionable, or requires board input, that would come back to the board. So really it is up to the board's pleasure of how we would like to handle invoices. We don't see a lot compared to many other boards. I think our primary invoices are paying our quarterly assessments to Neshoba Associated Boards of Health, both for their sanitation or sanitarian work as well as the nursing services work that they do for us. They are two separate I'm not sure if they're two separate invoices, two separate line items. They might be one invoice, but they're two separate line items. I believe those are our only two kind of standard invoices that we see very often. So really it's at the pleasure of the board how you would like to handle processing invoices that come into the board for authorization to be paid.
And remind us all how we did it the last year and the year before that and the years before that.
I'm going to ask any of the members of the board who might be able to answer that question. Let's start alphabetically with Mr. Baker, see if he has any input.
Sure. So typically the invoices and expenses are approved by the board at a vote, but able to be signed by the chair once approved by the board.
Is it the board's pleasure to continue with that model? Would you like to change the model?
I would make a motion to continue with the model that the board votes to approve expenses and the chair is able to sign the invoices and submit for payment.
I second.
All right, roll call vote. Kevin Baker,
Kevin Baker votes yes.
Gino Fratelloni,
Gino Ferroni, yes.
Matt Wason,
Matt Wason, yes.
Dan Kane votes yes. All right, so that'll be our process, is that any invoice that comes up will come before the board for a vote and approval, and the chair will sign on behalf of the board. I do not know, we don't have it on as a public hearing. We do have one outstanding invoice for, coincidentally, the Neshoba Associated Boards of Health with two line items. We have a line item of $3,897.31 for nursing services and $8,503.23 for environmental services, which covers the first quarter of fiscal year 2024 for a total of $12,454. Can I have a motion to approve the expenditure of $12,400.54 to meet this invoice?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call vote. Kevin Baker,
Kevin Baker votes yes.
Gino Fratelloni,
Gino Ferroni, yes.
Matt Wason,
Matt Wason, yes.
and Dan Kane votes yes. We've approved the invoice. I will be in touch with Brenda and get into the office in the next day or two and sign the invoice so our friends in Neshoba can receive their much needed funding to continue their awesome work.
Thank you.
All right. We do have a welcome. I don't see Claire here, but we'll have a Board of Health summer intern, Claire Schwartz. I certainly saw Kevin had shared with me. I'm not sure with the rest of the board a little bit of, because he kind of worked with them setting up this internship, what some of the expectations were. It sounds like it's going to be primarily administrative, working with Brenda and doing some of our OpenGov documentation, getting some things into the system so that we can be up and running more quickly than Brenda would probably be able to do on her own. So we certainly appreciate that help. Kevin, do you have this is at this point an unpaid internship. Do you know anything, any background? So I'm assuming she's a student. Is she a college student? What's she working on? Is there any other information that you would be comfortable sharing about our intern of what her goals are and where she's from and what her future is?
Sure. So she is a student at UMass. This is her, she's finishing her first year, and she is a public health major. She had reached out to see if she could help in any way, shape, or form, and we welcome her time and energy to help us develop the Department of Health here in Littleton. And she works 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. So if you're in the area, please stop by and say hi.
Awesome. Certainly. So I'm assuming she's doing this as
She didn't skip tonight. She's on vacation.
good for her. I'm assuming this is a college credit internship. Do we know?
It is not for college credit. However, it does align with her goals and objectives and her major. So we were able to get it to work.
All right. No, awesome. Just want to make sure there wasn't any paperwork that we needed to follow up to make sure that she is recognized for her work this summer so that she gets the appropriate credit at school for her work. But certainly we will work with her and see if there are other ways we can make sure she's recognized for dedicating free of charge her knowledge, expertise, and time this summer. We appreciate it. So
Yeah.
hopefully we
Matt
get to
and
meet
I-
her at one of our summer meetings.
Matt and I will be spending quite a bit of time with her this summer, and we look forward to answering any questions she might have, and look forward to helping us get very organized and get to a point to where we can be up and running.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Baker. All right. Correspondence. I have not seen any correspondence. Do any of our board members have any correspondence that they've received that they'd like to share? Yes, Mr. Baker.
Only that the @littletonma.org emails have been created for all of the Board of Health members, and that we should begin to use those. You should have an invitation in your current inbox.
Not yet.
Matt, you want to jump in?
Yeah. No, I sent it to you to test. So yes.
No, but all the emails are up.
They're all created,
Yeah.
but I don't think everybody got an email about it yet. So I will send that out. Everybody has now a littletonma.org email address, which will get around some of these issues we've had where we can't actually email town employees because of the email system. So hooray, we're all going to have those logins. I will send everybody an individual email with some information about it. Please start using it as soon as possible for Brenda's sanity as well, so that she can successfully get communications to us. And then along with that, we all have access to the town's cloud storage system, which is great. So with that login, you'll have your own private cloud storage area where you can keep your own Board of Health work. So you don't have to worry about keeping that on your own computer or device. As well as we have a BOH share. So we have a place now where we can actually all put documents that we can then read at the same time. And so the well regulations are going to be kind of the first foray into this, where you can suggest edits within the document. It can be tagged with your name. And then when it comes time for us to reconcile those changes, we can all be reviewing that document live, see what people have said and say, yes, we agree, no, we disagree, or we need to talk more about that. And then the minutes are going to be the same kind of thing. So now that we have this space, we'll work with Brenda to eventually get to a point where she can compose the minutes, put it into that shared space, and not have to email us all individually and get 5 emails back with slightly different changes. So again, that way we could all propose our changes online and then reconcile them as a group. Make sense?
It does. Awesome. Thank you, Matt. I did actually get my email and set it up. So yes, it's
Okay.
other
I will
than,
send
of
you a
course,
follow-up with some other details then. Cool.
that would be great. Yeah. And I think I got the OneDrive access info, but if you wouldn't mind resending that as well, I'd appreciate it. Certainly I do know that for folks who use Outlook either on their own or through work or school or other places, that Outlook sometimes gets kind of cranky if you're trying to use multiple instances at once. So please do your best to kind of work through that. If any of our members have any challenges, concerns, first ops, Brenda, IT, Matt, maybe would be able to help if somebody has a question.
I'm happy to be your first stop.
Okay, so that's great. So yeah, certainly if any of our board members have any challenges with the town email or the Outlook application or certainly OneDrive, that would be really helpful. So we're going to have Matt be our first point of contact, and then we can escalate from there if we need to IT in town. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate your doing that for us. I appreciate all the work getting it out there. It was on my list actually. I was going to show you I'm showing my camera, my notes, but my camera's fried. So it was on my list of, yes, we have email. Kevin, go ahead.
I just wanted to make a note. Jim, you are still have that health@address and also have that OneDrive access. So Matt, I don't know if you want to forward Jim anything from the OneDrive that we should all be sharing, maybe put the well regs to that one as well. Cause I know you moved some docs around.
Yes.
So I don't know if you just make sure Jim has everything that
Yeah.
we're looking at too.
Yeah.
And then if you wanted to test out uploading something there, Jim, it might be helpful for us to have whatever local well regs Harvard has with that testing on sale verbiage. Then maybe we could try and discuss at our next meeting and factor into ours. Thanks.
Great.
All right, great discussion. That leads us into any board member updates. Kevin, anything?
We've been working really hard to get into OpenGov and determine the most efficient way to set up our systems so that they will be operational and very functional for future and many years to come, and we won't have to adjust things. So it's taken us a little bit longer than we like, but I think we have had a call with the folks over at OpenGov last week, got some very informative pieces of guidance, and we're trying to implement those, basically just which record types to use for which instances, based on an initial permit and then 6-month inspections after, and keeping it all organized. So we are eagerly awaiting IT and the town administrator's office to give us some more permissions to get in there, maybe run a testing environment, basically just have the ability to make sure this is going to work and keep going, not get stalled, and really do the best we can for the town of Littleton in the organization of its data and all things that need to be made public through the OpenGov system.
No, thank you. I know it's been a ton of work, and like anything, it's a lot of prep time, lead time to make everything look suddenly smooth at the end. Going, well, see, it wasn't that hard. Isn't this easy? You can pull that stuff up. No one sees the thousands of hours it takes to make that thing look easy. Everybody sees the 300 hitter swinging, making it look easy, but not seeing the 3 a.m. in the batting cage time. Exactly. With that, I know Kevin and Matt have been working with the town administrator's office, the personnel board as well, continuing the process for the public health director position and the grading. It sounds like it's passed its first administrative grading. It's going to go before the personnel board for a second review at this point. And then once that happens, we'll have a better sense of where the grade is. And we'll be able to hopefully move forward with the process with HR support and on that side of things. I believe right now it was graded at a 16, and the personnel board is going to review, and we'll see if they leave it at 16 or move it to a 17. So I have not seen a time or a date for that. It sounded like the personnel board was supposed to meet last week, and it was postponed for their availability. I've not seen a rescheduled date yet. So
correct. We're trying to get a full quorum with those folks, and I guess schedules are hard to coordinate. So
okay, so certainly if I hear, I will share more. Kevin, if you hear, or Matt, you hear more with dates and stuff, please, if you would informationally share with the board. Obviously, we don't have any discussions offline, but information sharing is always acceptable as long as it's that kind of information. So yes, please share. We would love to hear of the status of things. It's been a long road. So, at this point, luckily that the Schober has been gracious enough to allow us to rejoin and continue utilizing their services for some time moving forward. So I want to maintain that relationship, as well as, explore how we can best serve, with some internal resources, either in conjunction or however it works out over time. So I'm glad it's moving forward. Again, I appreciate certainly Jim and his entire team of allowing us and continuing to serve our residents. It is appreciated. So thank you, Kevin. Matt, did you have anything else you wanted to share under member updates? No. Oh, yep. Matt, go ahead.
New topic. In kind of looking through OpenGov and files and all sorts of stuff, I've stumbled upon kind of two categories of permits that we need to put some attention to at some point. One would be the stable permit process. Stable permits are granted once a year. It's one of these, they'll expire on July 1st, and I forget the fee. I think it's a nominal $20 or $25 fee for it. It's a very short form, but the problem is that I believe they have all expired as of 2022, and it has fallen through the cracks. I think this is not a person fault. This is we have Neshoba, who does all of the Neshoba stuff, and they got that covered, and we know they have that covered. And then there's this board, and we've been able to utilize resources such as Brenda and her predecessor to do some of the additional works that we have. But the issue I see is that we don't have it documented. We don't have a process. It's a folder somewhere, and somebody just has to magically know that has to get done. And so this is a new discovery for me. And the other piece are the portable toilet temporary permits, which what I've been told is that nobody applies for those ever anymore at all. And both are, as I said, short forms, but in my opinion, if we're going to require somebody to fill out a form and pay a fee for some sort of health reason, coverage, health safety, public health, whatever it may be, I also feel that there needs to be a quality review of it, and not just somebody who's handling the piece of paper and takes the check and hands you your certificate, because then where's the public health review? So I'm going to kind of throw together potential, some maybe processes that we could build upon, but knowing that both of these things have fallen by the wayside and we're not monitoring it well, I wanted you all to be aware of it, because that's not acceptable, I think, for a town. So we need to tighten these up. And frankly, it's going to be a conversation to also have with town administration about when the Department of Health doesn't have resources and doesn't exist and has no people, these are the things that happen. We lose process, things fall through the cracks, and then as a board, we are not doing our job. So there will be more to come, but wanted to get that on your radar.
No, thank you very, very much. Certainly that's, as we've talked about in the past, that, we simply don't have a real process. And, stables, I'm not sure if that would fall under Jim for inspections or if that would fall under animal control office for inspections. I would lean towards probably animal control as one of their enforcement and regulatory actions, because we certainly have to nominate the animal control officer, even though it's a shared position. We nominate them for their position, their authority here in Littleton. So whether that's administrative oversight or administrative monitoring by Brenda and the department with her 0.2 FTEs dedicated or less to the Board of Health responsibility, working with the ACO for the inspection piece. I think that obviously it's a regulation that's, as we talked about, it doesn't do any good if we're not accomplishing the goal, which is making sure that animals are safe and healthy, and their environments are safe and healthy. So I simply don't know.
The stable one has a question like, what is your manure disposal plan? Well, so if nobody in a Department of Health or a Board of Health is actually looking at that application, then we're not doing a public health step ever. All we're doing is
Right.
cashing a check. So I want to have some sort of eyes on it. No offense to whoever's in an administrative assistant role who could be doing it, who could answer it just clearly, but that's not their job description. If it's a public health question, we need to make sure we have some public health professional actually reviewing and saying, yes, I approve this permit.
Yeah, no. And that's exactly what I meant. Simply having the administrative support recognize, hey, all of our permits for stables are going to expire on this date, and working with the ACU as the enforcement and inspection agent to make sure that those applications are updated or that those stables no longer exist, and that they're inspected and approved by, again, that's part of the ACO's job, is to inspection and regulatory enforcement. So that piece, same way we would send Jim or ask Jim to go out and do a Title V or a well or housing inspection, that the ACO, that's their expertise to do that piece. But we just need to make sure that both they're aware, hey, this is going on, or these need to be updated, or we've gotten these applications, and then closing that loop, make sure it's been done and it comes back. And we certainly have a process if there's an issue or a concern that the animal control officer can come before us, same as any other agent, whether it's tobacco control or Jim and his team, saying, I've got somebody who's out of compliance. We work with them trying to bring them into compliance with the regulations, and we've been unsuccessful. Now it's, at the board level. So I definitely agree. I'm all on board, and I think Open Gov will hopefully help with that, not falling through those pieces, not falling through the cracks. Although that one should be a pretty easy one, having the big list on the board going, okay, July is stable month. January is whatever, October is it October? April is mobile food trucks. Is it April? Is it food trucks? Jim would know. I think it's April, but whatever, the food truck, they all expire at the same time. I think it's April. It's just prior to summer season. Like all the motorcycles, every motorcycle needs to be inspected in April or May. I got mine inspected, I swear. Because it is New England and it's time for them to come back out. We want to make sure they're all safe, the same kind of model, but simply having even if it is simply at this point, having a big Post-it note going, July is stables. We should be either sending out reminders to stables or looking for the applications to come in, and the ACO should be aware that, okay, May and June are going to be busy times for you going to do stable inspections potentially. Portable toilets should fall under a couple different things. I would think, I'll ask Jim, do they work like, for vendors, do they work kind of the same way as mobile food vendors, where the company is approved by Neshoba on behalf of their catchment area, and then permits for any individual use has to be same as any other individual use in the community? Or have you been involved in those at all?
Two components of it. So the companies who pump need to be licensed by the board. And so we license a number of septic system, sewage haulers, septic haulers. The porta potty permits were something that come up new all of a sudden to me. All the time I've been in Littleton, we always haven't done them, but all of a sudden, I think it was Janet who had one once and said, we need to approve this. And it's like, was unaware of it. So I think with the handful that I have signed, for my purposes, it's we want to know who's pumping it. That way there, if there's a nuisance, we can certainly contact that company. We want to kind of know where it's going. We had a situation in one of our towns where they had to rebuild their beach house. And the only place, it's an awful location, the only place they could put the porta potties were inside the fence, like 15, 20 feet away from the pond. So we had to work with them to make sure that things were essentially affixed to the fence so nobody could tip them over and have the water head down to the pond. So, I mean, those kinds of reviews, and then we sign off on those. So there's not a set policy out there, but that's kind of how that process has worked.
Okay, so it is much informational of simply where is it going and why, and then if there are potential issues related to a location, then let's mitigate those risks when we can. Can I ask you off the top of your head, you said this was relatively new. I admit I do not know how old our porta potty regulations are.
I don't know that you have any, is I guess what I'm saying. I don't know that you have porta potty regulations. Some towns institute the need to get a porta potty with a construction permit, like a building permit, because if you're doing work on a site, they want a toilet on the site. New construction, there's no bathrooms on there. Even when you're rebuilding somebody's house, a lot of times they don't want contractors in and out of the house using the bathroom. So often you'll see the placement of a porta potty for those kinds of situations. So I don't know if it was kind of an outshoot of maybe when Ed came, that they started including porta potties in the open gov system for building permits. I just don't know how it came to be.
I think it was something Lisa
Yeah.
and Janet put together 2, maybe 3 years ago.
Okay.
And Mr. Zeldin was on the board, and Gino was on the board, and myself.
So it is, there's a piece built in OpenGov, but on the Board of Health webpage, on the left side is a direct link to the temporary portable toilet permit application. And it's a simple,
I think I asked Brenda to put it there because people were asking for it. So it's like, yeah, there it is. Now you can find the application.
yeah. And so, yeah, the piece of paper is downloadable. People could write on it and bring it in. Yes, it asks for all the location information, how many people are using it, the dates, the hauler, the cleaning schedule. It requests a map sketch of what it's going to look like and applicant information. So kind of like I was saying about the stable stuff, if we as a Board of Health feel that there needs to be some oversight, but as Jim is mentioning, if we don't have your regulations on it, then I don't know if we need to build some regulations before we try to impose the application and the permit fee. Or if there's such one-offs, is it hard to really document regulations around it, except a regulation that says thou shalt have a permit? And this actually says it's a 3-month permit maximum that's given. I'll stop.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Jim. Didn't the porta potty piece come from application for public gathering potentially at, was it that Soaring Hawk Center down there? Because they couldn't use their septic for that capacity they were looking to do on an outdoor event. And so we started talking about portable toilets, and then the fee thing came up. I think that's maybe how it.
I was going to say your memory is better than mine. I guess I don't recall.
Okay.
All right, I'm happy to take a look and see. I'm doing a quick scan. I don't see regulations around it, but I'm, again, kind of doing it on the side during our meeting. I will take a look and see if we have any regulation. Again, we need to just clarify what the regs are, if there are regs, how they're worded, to make sure that they're in compliance with the application and we're all on the same page and we have expectations that are consistent and consistently applied. If the regs aren't present, then we'll need to look at if we want to implement a process around that for some awareness and monitoring. As Jim said, if there's an issue, who can we address those concerns with, whether it's the property owner, whether it's the owner of the contractor or the owner of the porta potty itself. So we'll have to work on that. Certainly we see them. There's plenty in town, so we see them everywhere, including on town property. That we have many of our trailheads in the summertime have them. Fay Park has one that used to be summertime, but it seems like it's now near year round, which is great. But certainly it's something we need to be aware of as well. So having it all on the same page or same process is going to be valuable. So I will explore and I will share out what the regs are if they're present and how they're documented with everybody. But again, the same piece. Thank you, Matt, for bringing those both to our attention. As you discover challenges, please bring them forward so we can address them, because I think that's a big piece of, certainly we were talking about internal department, is that, Jim is great doing a lot of things, but there's a lot of pieces that aren't necessarily on his radar or, within his purview. Stables is not something that he's going to be aware of or thinking about. That really comes down to, unfortunately, without a department internally who's looking at the broader scope of town requirements and regulations, are simply going to get missed, because as a board, we have the responsibility, but we're not sitting in the office 40 hours a week. We're not seeing every piece of paper that's coming across. We just simply don't have that level of access that a regular employee in town hall working on behalf of the board and its regulations would have. So as we identify these things, it just needs to be added into our list of challenges and opportunities as we move forward. So thank you very much for sharing those. Gino, do you have anything to share from member updates?
The only thing I have to say is I went to a church right and they were trying to tell me that their water was getting brown. So I told them to put them in a bottle, and then I'll bring it to the water department.
Was that yesterday?
Yeah,
Yeah, they were flushing that the water department was flushing the lines yesterday.
okay.
And they
that's what
said they
it is.
sent an email out, but I didn't get an email and I don't check.
Yeah,
Facebook
me
on
too.
that,
Yeah,
so.
but at least I know now, because for some reason this morning when I went there to the church, the water was sort of a very, very clear.
Good.
So I must, like you say, they must have fixed it. That's it. That's
Yes,
all I have to
it's-
say. I appreciate you guys coming, and I hope you'll be safe, and we'll see you next week or a couple weeks from now.
All right, Jim, did you have anything that you'd like to share with us, or any concerns or anything that you would like to bring to us that hasn't been on the agenda already?
I don't.
Okay. As always, we appreciate you spending your time with us tonight. I don't have anybody in the audience for public input. I believe we've worked through our agenda and opportunities for any additional issues. If nobody else has anything, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
A motion to
Motion
adjourn.
Second,
I have a motion and a second. A roll call vote. Kevin Baker,
Kevin Baker votes yes.
Gino Fratelloni,
Gina Ferrona, yes, and I hope you have a nice weekend and be safe. It's going to be raining practically all week, late at night.
thank you, sir. Matt Wason,
Matt Wason, yes.
and the chair says yes. So it's a unanimous vote. We are adjourned our June 14th, Was that a wave, Kevin, or was that an issue? Okay, that's a wave. Okay, sorry. We have adjourned our June 14th, 2023 Board of Health meeting. Thank you all. We will see you in 2 weeks on the 28th for our next regularly scheduled meeting, unless anything comes up beforehand.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, all. Thank you.